So this is question number 10 from exam number 3. And it asks you, when factored, which of the following expressions contain a factor of x plus 1? There are a lot of different ways to go about this, but the way that I was intending for you to approach this problem is to look at the available choices and just factor them. That would be the way that for our course we know how to figure out what the factors of these various expressions are. So let's start, for example, with the first expression here, x squared plus 3x plus 4. In order to factor that expression, what we'd be looking for is a pair of numbers which when we multiply them together we get 4, and when we add those same pair of numbers together we get 3. So what are some options that are available to us? This is exam 3. This is exam 3 now. Yeah. So when I look at this, I might try 4 and 1, because 4 times 1 is equal to 4. What's the problem with that? Why doesn't that work? Right, 4 and 1 doesn't work, because even though they multiply together to give me 4, they don't add together to give me 3. So 4 and 1 doesn't work. That's not going to do it for us. So I'll try a different combination, maybe 2 and 2. But 2 and 2 also doesn't work because 2 plus 2 is not equal to 3. So we're out of luck, actually, in this example. We can't find a way to factor x squared plus 3x plus 4 using the techniques that we know. And so therefore, x plus 1 is not going to be a factor of x squared plus 3x plus 4. So that one's not going to work. And in fact, we can't factor it at all, which is kind of interesting. If you move to the next choice, x squared minus 2x plus 1, we're looking for a pair of numbers which multiply together to give me positive 1, and which add together to give me negative 2. What pair of numbers fits that bill? Negative 1 and negative 1 fit the bill, because when I multiply them together, I get positive 1, and when I add them together, I get negative 2. So we've found a pair of numbers which win the sum and product game. Right? Their product is 1, their sum is negative 2. And that means that we can factor this expression using those two numbers, x minus 1 times x minus 1. But then we look at those two factors and say, well, neither one of them is the x plus 1 that the question is asking us about. So choice B is out. That one doesn't work. And then we'll just keep on going down the line. X squared plus x plus 1. We need a pair of numbers which multiply together to give me 1 and which add together to also give me 1. Try as you might. 1 and 1 is not going to work because they don't add together to give you 1. And the only other option would be negative 1 and negative 1, but those also don't add together to give you 1. So this one, too, doesn't have a factorization using our methods that we know. So no go. X plus 1 is definitely not a factor of that one. So then we move on to D. And this one's a little more interesting. We're looking for a pair of numbers which multiply together to give me 1, right, the constant, which is in here. But then the question is, what do those numbers have to add together to give me in this expression? The product has to be 1. What does the sum have to be? Negative 1. Oh, yeah, you know what? I screwed this up. We need a negative sign on this 1 that I wrote in here. Yeah. Well, yeah, except that the negative 1 was our constant term here. Where we got the sums in the other examples, the blue numbers, we got those from the coefficients that were attached to the x's. What coefficient is attached to a plain x in this example? Well, there's a 1 attached to the constant. There's a 1 attached to the x squared. But there is no term in that expression with x to the first power. So if I were to ask you what is the coefficient of x in the expression x squared minus 1, what would you say? I have 1x squared. I have negative 1 constants. But how many x's do I have? None. So I have no x's in this expression, which means that the sum that I need when I play the sum and the product game is 0. So I'm looking for a pair of numbers which multiply together to give me negative 1, but those same numbers have to add together to give me 0. 0 because we don't have a term which has x to the first power in this expression. So what pair of numbers fits this bill? Multiplies to give me -1, adds together to give me 0. The numbers that win that game are -1 and +1. -1 times 1 is -1. -1 plus 1 is equal to 0. So how then does x squared minus 1 factor? How do we use these numbers to factor the expression x squared minus 1? We just use them as the other terms in the binomials x plus 1 and x minus 1. So x squared minus 1 factors as x plus 1 times x minus 1. And then the question is, does that contain a factor of x plus 1? It absolutely does. So there's our answer. Exam 3, number 10, the answer was D. And I don't think there is an easier way, as far as we know in this class, to have solved this multiple choice problem. If we want to know which of these expressions has x plus 1 as a factor, we should go through and try factoring every one of them. And whichever one of them gives me an x plus 1 as one of its factors must be the one that we wanted. There's some fancier ways to do this, but as far as our course is concerned, I think this is probably the most direct.